Good afternoon. We're going to allow students to be joining here. Give it a moment or so. About 30 more seconds. All right, good afternoon. Hi, everyone. My name is Dana Wenger, and I am the Student and Alumni Relations Coordinator and a career coach here in the Career Enrichment Network in the College of the Liberal Arts. Thank you so much for joining us today. We know this is a very busy time of year as it's the last week of class and lots of work going on. We appreciate you taking a break from that. This hour, I can guarantee you're going to gain some valuable insight from these amazing alumni that we have joining us today. What we'll be doing, I'm going to introduce who we have here with us today, and then I'm going to read their bios, and we're going to get right into the question and answer portion of this panelist. So Lauren Grenice is here. Lauren, she's Assistant Director in the Career Enrichment Network and also a career coach. So many of you may meet with her. She's one of 5 career coaches that we have here in the Career Enrichment Network that you are able to sign up for one-on-one coaching appointments with. Lauren is going to be monitoring the Q&A today, and we are going to highly encourage you to take this opportunity to ask these amazing alums questions that you would like to know a little bit more about. We see so many students in this desire to enter the psychology, counseling, helping profession. And we are really thankful that these 3 alums all may have had, they're all working in the helping profession, but may have had some different steps along the way in their journey. And so learning more about that today is hopefully the goal of this session. And just, again, we're so thankful and grateful that they have volunteered their time to be with us for this hour. So I'm going to read their bios, and then we're going to start right into the question and answer portion of this. Samantha Tomer. Samantha is an independent private practice therapist based out of South Carolina, serving clients up and down the East Coast. She specializes in working with adult survivors of trauma and abuse, as well as victims of crime. At Penn State, Samantha studied French and Francophone studies and minored in psychology and international studies. After undergrad, she decided to pursue her Master of Education in Counselor Education at Penn State and graduated in 2014. Since then, she has worked in a number of different mental health capacities, from community mental health to nonprofit organizations, and now in her own private practice. Samantha continues to support Penn State and serves on the local alumni chapter board by hosting football watch parties, happy hours, and other alumni involvement events. She continues her French studies and fulfills her love of French culture by house sitting for fellow Penn Staters who currently live in Paris. Welcome, Samantha. Dr. Stephanie Stamma earned her PsyD in clinical psychology from Florida Institute of Technology in 2015 after completing a Master of Arts in clinical and community psychology at UNC Charlotte in 2010. A Penn State alumna, Bachelor of Science in Psychology in 2008, Stephanie was excited to return north to Happy Valley to work at Penn State Center for Counseling and Psychological Services, CAPS, in 2014. In her current role as Assistant Director of Community Education and Outreach, Stephanie pursues passions in advocacy, prevention, and creatively cultivating connections. Her clinical interests include working with young adults on the autism spectrum, mindfulness, trauma, couples therapy, and psychological assessments. Stephanie spends her free time watching her children explore the world, gardening, keeping her dogs out of the plants, and watching movies with her husband. Welcome, Stephanie. And our third panelist for today is Cassie Holtzapfel. Cassie attended Penn State from 2017 to 2021 with a major in psychology. During her time at Penn State, Cassie was part of the Thon Org trilogy. After graduating from Penn State, Cassie moved to North Carolina to attend UNC Wilmington from 2021 to 2023. Cassie graduated in May of this year and received her master's in social work. Cassie applied for licensure, is now a licensed clinical social worker, associate level LCSWA. Cassie works as an outpatient school-based therapist in the elementary, middle, and high schools in the county she lives in. Cassie works in the schools and sees kids throughout their school day. She also provides outpatient level therapy to the children and handles many tasks such as documentation, referrals, training, using evidence-based practices, conducting research, and so much more. Welcome, Cassie. Okay, so to get started, again, remember Lauren is monitoring the chat, so please feel free to put questions in there. So let's start with Samantha. Students are very interested in the counseling and therapy field, as we had mentioned. What is your advice for them on making this a career?
The very first thing that I would think about, and this is something that I didn't do when I was applying to grad school, was research the different ways to become a counselor, because there's multiple different, I mean, we all have different licenses in this room right now, and each one of those might be a different fit and better fit for each one of us. I wish that I had done that research. I'm very happy with where I landed. But looking back, that's the very first thing that I would recommend is, what does that work look like? What types of things do you do? What kind of framework does it come from? Because I worked for a nonprofit, and I tend to look at things more through a social worker lens, even though I'm an LPC. So I think that would have been something helpful for me. Yeah, I think that would be the very first step, because I think that does influence your thinking and how you work with clients so much. Not to say that the environment that you work in later doesn't do that too, but that would have been helpful at the beginning.
Great, thank you. Cassie or Stephanie, want to jump in?
Yeah, I echo that. I think it's one of the trickiest things of being in the mental health field, that there are kind of like so many options, and in many ways, there's no wrong way to go. There are also jurisdictional differences. If you know you want to work and live forever in like New York, then you can really start to hone what are the needs and expectations of this specific place I want to work in. And different jurisdictions, different states will have different guidelines about like what somebody with a master's degree can do or not do. Can you practice across state lines in different ways? There are a lot of these elements that make it even trickier to make those decisions. So I think that's one of the reasons this program, the mentor program through liberal arts, is so helpful, because there are just so many nuances that I think many of us just found kind of along the way. I think the way I navigated that was really just trying to test the waters and test out what I wanted to do. I tested out, I was in a research lab for a little while. I worked in a nonprofit for a little while, all in undergrad. I was a peer health educator at Health Promotion and Wellness for some time. So tried to just dip my toes in the water of all these different options to gauge what I was hopeful for. And then hope to get to the more like tactical piece of what degree do I go for later on, which I'm sure there's another question that I'll respond to with more of that detail.
Fantastic, thank you. Testing the waters. Cassie?
Yeah, I completely agree with what they both said. I know for the longest time I was up in the air, between becoming a LPC or a social worker. And really what I did was just research what you can do with each license. And that was super beneficial. And like biggest piece of advice is just to remain calm. I remember freaking out because it seems so terrifying, but it all works out. It really does.
I love that. Remain calm, that's for sure. Okay, go ahead, Lauren.
I was gonna say, Dana, we have a question that a couple questions in the chat already, or sorry, in the Q&A. So the first one is, what are some of the things to factor in when looking into graduate school for MFT or LPC programs besides APA accreditation? So I don't know if any of you want to start with that, or if you know.
For LPCs, I would recommend looking for a KCREP accredited program. I'm not familiar because I'm not a psychologist besides using APA to write papers in grad school. But for LPCs, programs, they don't have to be KCREP accredited, but it is to your advantage if you are KCREP accredited. Or if the school is, because it makes licensure much easier because there's a lot more information that you have to provide from a licensure standpoint if your school or university or program is not KCREP accredited. And I would look at, and this is something that I did, and I initially wanted to do school counseling, and I have since veered from that clearly. Is looked at the professors who are in the program or who are doing the research in the program, because the connection with those individuals is really important, because there are classes where you do dive deep and you're self-reflective, and I would recommend wanting to feel safe with these people and build a rapport with them as well. And they might be writing you recommendations later and things like that. So looking at who the instructors are, I mean, just from a program standpoint, I think that's helpful. And then also thinking about where you want to live, where you would like to work. I mean, I'm now in South Carolina. I stayed in Pennsylvania for a long time. That's not how it is for everyone. But the schools in that state also gear the program to prepare you for licensure in that state. So if you want to get licensed in Pennsylvania, it would be beneficial to look at a Pennsylvania school. Not that schools aren't all similar, but Pennsylvania schools are gearing you to get licensed in the state of Pennsylvania. And same thing for any other state that you're in. And again, it's not to say that it can't be done, but those requirements are, and I'm licensed in multiple states, and every state is so different. They have different fees. They have different rules and regulations. So that's something, a long-term thing to think about. And I promise you, I did not think about that when I was in school or applying, but it's something to keep in mind because rules are so different, and there's things in process of changing, and that's probably not a topic for today. So by the time you are in graduate school, this whole world might look very different as far as licensure, but that would be one of my biggest recommendations, KCREP, and thinking about where you would like to be long-term.
Thank you, Samantha. Would anybody like to add anything else? No. Okay, we'll move on. Thank you. Great question. Looks like we have another one in the chat. And that is, how does someone start to look for internships? Did any of you have an internship?
From a psychology angle, internships are embedded in your graduate school program. So I'm pretty sure that's the case as well for master's programs, because we have some externs who are technically on their internship from their master's program here at CAPS as well. So when you're in graduate school, like their ultimate goal is to get you prepared for the work that you're going to do. And part of that is getting hours accumulated of work experience in the clinical work. And so internships are usually a part of your last year of your program. Sometimes it can be embedded. I think the word internship can be vague. I think sometimes, I know for psychology, I don't want to speak to other fields. I know for psychology, it is usually your 5th year, your final year of your program. An internship application is really strongly oversought process. It's there's a whole system that people apply through, and there's a certain time of year that everybody applies, and then there's one big match day where everybody learns where they go. It's kind of like residency match for medical students. And so yeah, so that's not something people need to start necessarily looking into until you're kind of at that point in your program where you're starting to decide where is it that I might want to work location wise for a year, or what type of service do I want to be providing? Like, do I want to work in a VA system? Do I want to work at a university for a year? So things like that. But yeah, it's usually embedded in. I'll let the other two folks respond though, as far as master's level.
Thank you.
Yeah, for social work, ours was embedded in the program too. We had a specific professor who took note of all of our interests, and she matched us very well to what we wanted to do.
Very similar for LPCs, or I mean, I was school counseling, so we had advisors to help facilitate it. You know, we still had to interview, and we had to kind of like narrow down our top choices and things like that. And that's specific to Penn State. I do work and see other students who are in graduate programs for LPCs, and it's not always the same, that there is a lot more independent research in trying to get an internship. So at least in the LPC counseling field or school world, I think it probably varies by school and how much autonomy the school is giving you. They still have to approve your internship. They oftentimes give you recommendations of who to reach out to and who to contact and pre-approved programs. So I think it does vary slightly, but for the most part, again, embedded, it just might depend on the school and how they facilitate getting you placed.
Fantastic, thank you. So with that being said, it's obviously going to be much part of their master program or advanced degree. While you're at Penn State, are there some suggestions that you have for students getting some experience here, or maybe what was a valuable resource that you found when you were at Penn State?
I think the most valuable resource was the Career Enrichment Center for sure. Lauren helped me a lot, and she really did. And another thing was doing like research labs and things to be involved. That is always super beneficial.
One thing, this isn't something that I did, but many of my peers in my cohort in grad school had done, was work in community mental health in a bachelor's level capacity. In what I noticed in the long run, it opened up other doors for them when you did graduate and worked in, if you wanted to, which a lot of us do end up in community mental health, which has a lot to do with like insurance and things like that. But a lot of my peers had worked as like a TSS or behavioral health worker, things that I don't know what the rules and regulations are for that now, but working with people one-on-one, but in a bachelor's level capacity, it really introduces you to that kind of setting and helps you learn and get connected and stuff like that. So that could be something helpful in addition to the other like career enrichment network and things like that.
I think I mentioned some of the things earlier I had found helpful, but I'll just reiterate them. And actually, I didn't mention, one of the things I guess I found most helpful was I was a mentee in the Liberal Arts Mentor Program. So one of the things I got to do, which I don't think many people do, was I was able to go observe with my mentor, who was a psychologist who worked at the Meadows Psychiatric Facility, who's an inpatient mental health facility here locally near University Park. And I was able to go and observe and shadow a group therapy session. And it was the first time I really saw like what I felt like was the magic of therapy. Like by the end of this hour, all these magical things happened in my mind. I was like, how did people like start to think this way so differently in just this short period of time? And it was just so inspiring, I think, for me at the time. Prior to that, I had been a peer educator at Health Promotion and Wellness. I did that for, I think, my entire 4 years here, doing one-on-one basics appointments with students, as well as HIV counseling. That is not currently a part of the program anymore, but the peer educator program is still going and strong, and do, I think, a far vast more wellness sessions in variety and type than I used to. So it's still a pretty awesome program. I also joined a research lab early on. I wasn't sure if that was something I liked the idea of. Numbers scared me, and I didn't think that pulling data was something I could imagine doing. But I was actually like one of the most valuable experiences I had. While I don't see myself doing research in the long run in a heavy way, I actually do a lot of research work right now in my current role. So it's totally invaluable, that experience. And then I also worked for Strawberry Fields, which is still a current local mental health community mental health agency here in the State College area. And I worked as a direct support professional, so one-on-one in this very in the adult, well, it was the adult program, so one-on-one in sort of a setting that was supporting adults sort of do some independent living activities. So it was a really wide variety of things I had done over my 4 years here as an undergrad, and those things helped me navigate toward my next step, which was my master's program. I did a terminal master's program before deciding if I wanted to go into my doctorate program, because I was still kind of unsure at the end of my bachelor's degree what I wanted to do.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. It's great advice. Lauren is adding some sites into the chat that are being mentioned during this session. So please take a look there. Some great options to get involved in this area. And it looks like we have a couple questions. And two of the questions are kind of a little bit related. So the pros and cons of getting a PsyD rather than a PhD. And maybe like a little bit about what the differences are with the PhD and PsyD for clinical psych.
Yeah, this is a really common question. And I feel like as time goes on, the differences, that gap of difference is actually smaller and smaller. I think in the end, you can have a PsyD or a PhD and kind of do whatever it is you want to do either way. I think the major difference that I've seen over time is really just the way the graduate programs function. With a PhD, it's much more research intense and research heavy, which, as I mentioned earlier, numbers and research were not something I was like super into. PsyD programs, you tend to start the clinical work, the like what we call like practicum, your kind of one-on-one like therapy experiences. Those start a little bit earlier, in place of where usually a PhD program would be starting research much sooner. Research heavy programs do tend to have a lot more, it used to be called the publish or perish, which was terrifying at the time to think of. I don't think that's such a intense, I don't think that's such a thing anymore as much as it maybe used to be, but a lot of like, make sure you're getting all this research in, write an article about it, write a paper, get it published as much as you can. And that was at the time that I was entering grad school, something very true for many PhD programs. And so if you wanted to go into academia and be a professor or do research in neurology or neuropsychology, that was totally what you would see yourself doing. Whereas somebody doing more of a PsyD would aim toward more something in the counseling, independent practice sort of realm. And, more and more, as I said, like, I think that gap is closing. Really, definitely, PhD programs still are pretty research intensive. And the PsyD program I attended, some people really wanted to do more research. And so they got to do more research alongside doing some of the counseling work. So it really was nice because people could kind of blend that. And I think PhD programs are starting to do that as well. They're starting to integrate the more practice and research integration. So those are primarily the differences. In the end, you can usually do what it is that you want to do with either degree.
Great, thank you.
All right, we have another question in the chat. Samantha, this is actually a really great question for you. So if you do pursue an LPC, would it be possible to work in schools as well as a school counselor, or do you need a specific certification or degree in order to do that?
For school counseling, you do, so half of this answer is I don't know, and I'd have to do some research for it, but because I think it probably varies by state and school. I think my school counselor certification, which was K through 12, just expired like 2 or 3 years ago. But there are some schools that will hire an LPC as a school counselor. I don't know for sure if you also have to have the school counselor certification as well. So that would be something, and I just don't know the answer to this anymore. So my program was built so that we could all end up with an LPC, even though you were in the school counselor program, and that's the Penn State counselor ed program. So I don't fully know, but I think there are schools that will hire an LPC for a school counselor. I will say from my school counseling knowledge that I do have is that there are things from the school side of it that would be helpful to know. So probably pursuing that certification, if it's not required, could be really helpful because there's the American School Counselor Association that has their ethics and guidelines and things like that, so that you are tested on. So it probably depends. So I know that's not the best like black and white answer for you, but I think it probably is both, maybe and, or I'm not really sure, but I think it probably depends.
Go ahead,
So I
Kathy.
actually recently looked into this too because I like just having a moment where it's like, I feel like I could be a school counselor too, but then I looked into it and you do need to have a certification, but at the same time, it does vary by state.
Thank you so much.
Great. Okay, let's start with Cassie. What liberal arts skills have been most valuable in your career? And maybe what do you feel like the top skills are for students to have in this field?
Definitely for me, I focus on just being compassionate and passionate about what I'm doing and just being a listener because most of the time like since I work with children, that's really just what they need is someone who will listen to them. And patience for sure.
I'm sure. Thank you. Stephanie?
Ditto to all of those. I think one thing I'll add that felt noticeable for me in the field was communication, communication and boundaries, especially somebody female identified, and so being socialized as a female. I think in our society, setting boundaries, not always showing up with a smile, my nonverbals, all the different ways I communicate, not just through email or text message, but my nonverbals, that was something that is definitely an area I've harnessed a lot more practice as far as, yeah, that liberal arts skill.
Awesome, thank you. Samantha, anything else to add?
I think the only thing that I would add on top of that is awareness. And in my liberal arts education, and we all have different, I think we all came from different degrees, learning about different cultures, because chances are you probably are going to be working with somebody who is different than you. And I know with the BA at Penn State, there's so much more of that, those kind of credits that you're taking. So I think being open and being aware is really helpful. And communication, I can't say enough about what they both already said. And one thing I would add in addition to like liberal arts is that there's other ways that you're learning those skills outside of just your degree, and to be very creative when you're thinking about that and applying it. I waited tables for until I was like 29. And that skill in and of itself, for so many different reasons, was so beyond helpful. And it might not look like that when you're like doing your resume and stuff like that, but there are things that you're doing probably outside of school that are also helping you and gearing you up to be successful in this field.
Can I just add, like, because I'm not sure if it might fit in for a question. I think, Samantha, what you're saying is something I wanted to make sure kind of maybe was referenced here for everyone, that like Cassie earlier said, like, be calm. I think also, like, and adding to that, like, be patient. I think so often we're like, oh my gosh, am I done with this degree? Am I done jumping through all of these like hoops to get done and graduate so I can like get into the real world? And like nothing good is rushed. And so taking time, like I coached gymnastics for years, like, like there are just other ways you can, still harness all the skills and passions and interests you have. And so just be super patient about it. You don't have to know right away. As I said, I like did a terminal master's degree because I was like, I don't know what I want to do. And did I sometimes think through like, wow, I would have been done like 2 years ago, but I have 2 more years left of school, and sure, sometimes that came up. And I'm so grateful I was patient because there was so much more like life to live and experience to gain through that extra time. And that time isn't something you can get back. You can always go for like, you can get however many degrees you want in the world, but just the patience with feeling like it's something you feel drawn to and that you really want to do is so critical. So be patient. I'm so glad you brought that up, Samantha. Thank you.
I love all of what you're saying. And it's patience with others in your daily work and patience with yourself. I think it's so important. And also, we really stress in the Career Enrichment Network the out of classroom experiences. So waiting in customer service, busy, hectic environment, those transferable skills that you're learning can apply to your career. So thank you for bringing that up as well, Samantha. It looks like we have another question in the chat. Lauren, do you have one there for us?
Yeah. So how did you all figure out what groups or populations you wanted to work with when getting your license, whether that be children, adults, adolescents, or even like specific disorders or mental health concerns that you all focus on? So Cassie, I guess we'll start with you.
I think for me, it was just experience. Was able in my internship to get experience with all the populations, and I was able to narrow it down to which ones I felt most comfortable doing and which ones I was most interested in. But I know that's not the case with everyone. I just had like a very good placement where I could have that opportunity, and that's just how it worked for me.
Thank you. How about you, Samantha?
I had quite the journey in figuring this out. So I feel like I have a lot to say about this. So as I've mentioned already, I started in school counseling because I thought that I wanted to work with kids, specifically like junior high, middle school, and that was great. And then I had a really hard time. I didn't find a school counseling job because in the state of Pennsylvania at the time, it was really difficult. So I ended up in community mental health where I was working in a school-based program as a behavioral health worker for a couple of years. And that was fine. It was really draining. It was hard for so many reasons. And I still, at the time, wanted to continue working with kids. And then I got a job as an outpatient counselor, and I worked with people ages 4 to, I can't even remember how the oldest age that I worked with. It was all across the board. And that job is also very challenging. And I found myself at a nonprofit where, again, we were working all age groups. And that's when I found that I really enjoyed working with adults way more than I enjoyed working with children. And it was probably the biggest, most helpful job that I have had to date because it led me to where I specialize now. So I work with trauma and survivors of primarily sexual abuse, but other childhood trauma and complex trauma. And that's just where I found myself thriving. And then when I went on to my private practice, I was able to narrow that down more. I don't work with children anymore, unless it was like a very special case that I would work with. And I still kind of hone in on the population that I enjoy working with the most. And That's not to say that I don't have like a spectrum of people, but I found myself working with 20s and 30s women primarily, and then you can narrow it down even further, but that also changes frequently. I've found myself becoming a little bit more interested in sex therapy and, trying to like hone in on more different skills, which, like Cassie said, comes with experience and learning more about different modalities and, working with different individuals and what you like about that population and what you don't. And it's kind of like, I like to say, a working document because, I haven't in the last, I graduated in 2014 and I've changed so many times as a clinician, and I probably will continue changing and, growing. So a lot of experience trying new things. You don't, again, being patient, you don't have to have it all picked out, the day that you graduate. I certainly didn't, and I'm kind of glad that I didn't. As hard as that journey was at times, it really led me to what I like and where I thrive the most. So being open to that, and it took me 6 years to get my license because I didn't know I wanted to get my license. So, there's so much room to grow and learn, and patience and calm is so, so important.
Thank you. How about you, Stephanie?
Yeah, as Samantha said too, yeah, it's something that I find is also always like changing in an ongoing way. For the most part, my interests actually, I think, yeah, probably all of them, with the exception of couples therapy, came really out of nowhere, very surprising, very happenstance. So I did start my career, like my master's thesis, my dissertation, all focused on sex therapy and couples therapy. And that was where I had done a good portion of my practice. With my mentor in his private practice at the time. And then I was working at a university counseling center at Florida Institute of Technology, and as one of my practicum sites. And one semester, a ton of my students were had diagnoses of autism. And that was just like my caseload for the semester. And the work just felt natural and amazing and fulfilling, and it just fell in my lap. Like I wasn't like, that's what I want to do this year. It just happened. And yeah, I think that's the same for my trauma work, working with here at Penn State, working with students who have been victims of Title IX violations, usually sexual assault, sexual abuse. I think if you put that on paper, I would have been like, yeah, that doesn't sound like that's something I want to work with. That sounds like a really hard, population. Sounds like something, like, I don't know, beyond my capabilities, probably some imposter syndrome going on there. And then just doing the work, it felt natural. It felt, fulfilling and enthralling. And so same goes for psychological assessment. There's and some of the research work that I do, it sort of just pops in surprising ways. And I'm like, yeah, I guess that is something that I enjoy doing. So yeah, I think that as long as you're keeping your mind open, I mean, part of our, keeping your license is continuing education. And I kind of, sometimes that's annoying. So you're like, oh, I have to do this. But like, it's also exciting because then you can see, all of these mailers that you get from seminar companies that want you to attend their seminars, but there are really cool topics you probably wouldn't have thought. You're like, oh yeah, I will check that out. And so, yeah, sometimes it's just kind of unexpectedly, those interests and specialties will come out of nowhere.
Thank you all so much. It sounds like kind of taking advantage of those happenstance opportunities, and really just leaning into your experiences and curiosities around populations can help. So great. So the next question in the chat, and then I'll kick it back over to you, Dana. Are there many research opportunities outside of the university? So I don't know if any of you have had experience with this, but it is a common question that I see in career coaching a lot. Maybe there are students who want to take a gap year and get a little bit more research experience under their belt, but aren't quite sure how to do so. So I'm wondering if anybody wants to answer that question.
It's not something I feel like I have a lot of knowledge about, but I have mentored students who have done those gap years and were applying to do more data analyst and laboratory research oriented positions, usually at universities. And I'm trying to think, I think the part that I'm stuck on is I'm actually not sure where they found the research position opportunities. I think I know at least one person was looking for opportunities in a certain area. So was just looking at the university website kind of over and over the universities that were in that general area. But I feel like there's potentially a place. I feel like there's got to be a place where there's a website for positions in lab settings. I know there's positions in counseling centers website for job openings at university counseling centers. So I feel like there must be one for labs and research. I just wish I knew what it was.
I don't know, Samantha or Cassie, any suggestions?
I also don't know a ton about this. When I was in college, I didn't take advantage of those things. So as far as like what's available besides what has already been mentioned, I'm not sure, but I also have mentored quite a few students who have been searching and applying and finding research opportunities as on their own. That's just not something that I did or had been interested in at the time. So it's hard for me to speak on, other than, I've seen a lot of my mentees do research and find those opportunities.
Cassie, I see you unmuted.
Yeah, I don't know much about research at all.
Yeah.
I know I did one through the university, and
Yeah. I know, and maybe I can speak to this just a little bit because I've worked with some students who have done this. Higheredjobs.com is a really great resource if you're looking to work in higher education in general. And you can search by research in different labs there. Some are going to be more STEM field related, but there are psych positions that have been posted there. The other recommendation that I typically make is just honestly doing a search on Indeed, or if you have a particular school in your area that you are interested in, like maybe you're in the Philly area and you are looking at, I don't know, Temple. You could look at Temple's psychology department, see if they have any research labs, and do some of that kind of cold outreach. But that's a really great question. Thank you, Anna, for asking that in the chat. And thank you all for answering to the best of your knowledge as well. I know it's a tricky one, but Dana, I'll kick it back over to you.
Lauren, that was a great example. I think just, again, reaching out to individual websites as well. If you are looking in a certain area, that can be, we've done that before with students. This question is directed for Samantha. Do you have any tips or advice on opening up your own practice?
I could do a whole talk on this. So I don't even know where to
Does
start.
anyone want to stay for another hour?
I wish I could, but I have a client at 5. So I think first and foremost is understanding, it's so hard. There's so many different ways that you can go about it. And it depends on like your comfort level and like how much do you want to have in place before you get started? Like, do you want all your paperwork like to a T, or do you want just enough to do it and get started? So I think it'll be more easy for me to start with how I did it, and you will try to be as brief as possible. In 2020, I thought I was going to give up counseling forever because I knew I wanted to travel, and I could not see a way for me to do that and do this work, because in my head, and this was my own stuck point, was that you had to do it in person. This job was never going to stay online. And by happenstance, I was in a Facebook group that was online therapists, like resources, and I kept getting notifications and kept getting notifications. And I was like, wait a minute, maybe I can. So that kind of was really helpful for me. And I ended up paying for a course to help guide me through the process. And I was working for another group practice at the time. So and full time when I was an academic advisor for a branch campus. And so I did it really slow. It took me about 6 months to open because I was still working full time, working for someone else part time. So I was able to take my time with it. I started like getting a business bank account. I formed an LLC in Pennsylvania. I was working toward my licensure at the time, so that was still in progress. I bought a domain name and a website and things like that. It sounds super basic, but those were the things that felt good to me to get in line first. And then I did paperwork, and fortunately, someone else did that and vetted it by a lawyer for me, so I paid for it. Had paperwork in line, and I had already had a Psychology Today profile, which isn't the end all be all, but that's how I started. So I was able to like just very smoothly transition when I left the group practice and work on my own. But then, and this is something that I know can't speak for the other programs, but we didn't learn this in grad school, was how to actually run a business by yourself. I'm my own bookkeeper. I am my own marketer. I network. I'm like the CEO, the CFO. I do at this moment in time, I do everything, which was a massive learning curve for me because I learned bookkeeping. I track all of that stuff. You have to maintain business licenses. I'm licensed in multiple states, so I'm paying attention to my CEUs for all these different states that I'm licensed in. Marketing is something that I can't say I hate it, but I don't love it. I'm at the point where I'm going to pay for someone to just revamp my whole website for me because I don't want to do it. It was really hard for me to learn and want to be invested in doing those things. But it's been a journey, and there's a lot of moving pieces, and we didn't learn any of this in grad school, so it's been like piecemealing things together for myself, which is kind of, I like some of this, so it's kind of fun. But then there are days where I'm like, I don't want to do all of this alone anymore. So taking baby steps, being patient and being calm, and don't freak out about it because everyone is in this boat when they're first starting. And it's fun. That's as brief as I can be with it, I think.
Thank you so much. And that just brought me to think about another resource that we have through LionLink, which is called LionLink Projects. And alumni can post if they're looking for some assistance in a certain area for like a short-term project for students to sign up and help. And students can then gain experience. Some are unpaid, some are paid, but it's just a small stipend. So it's kind of a win-win for both. So that, Lauren, thank you for posting that in the chat. Again, students, if you have any other questions, please post them as we're getting closer to the end of the hour. So post your questions in there if you have some. And the next I'm going to ask is, what is like probably the hardest or the most discouraging part of your work? And on the flip side, what do you love the most about your job? Cassie, do you want to start?
Yeah, I can. I think since I'm newer to like the therapy field, the most discouraging thing was honestly figuring out exactly where I wanted to be, like job wise. If I want, I originally started at a different job, and this is why I said to be patient earlier, but I was rushing and I was like, I just need to take the first job that's offered to me, and I hated it. And it was a little discouraging because I was like, maybe I chose the wrong career, but it really is just, it was just the job. I would go into people's houses and provide them with family therapy, and sometimes it was just a little scary. But some people love it, but it was just not for me. So that was a little discouraging because I felt like maybe I chose the wrong thing. But then I got it together and I found a job that I love doing. And I think that could be what I think is the most rewarding, is just finding something you love to do. And it does still feel like work. The paperwork is not fun, but meeting with the kids is amazing and it's really rewarding.
Thank you. Stephanie, do you want to go?
Sure, yeah. Say one of the hardest parts, working in, it probably not unique to the university setting. I think this is just probably true for any setting where you're working for a business. But working within a larger system that's sort of telling you like, oh, the budget's different this year. You know, as a state university, we were waiting for the budget to pass for however long that felt like it was. And we're really reliant on resources to know what can we do, what can we offer based on whatever allotment of resources we're given. And resources could certainly be financial, but also time or sometimes we're able to receive certain types of donations, and sometimes there are restrictions on what you're able to receive. You know, there are sort of guidelines that the university has. And again, this is true for, I think, all different types of businesses, not just universities. This would be community mental health clinics, for example, probably quite similar. So I think that's kind of the hard part that I experience, where I'm like, oh, we could be doing so many things, especially as outreach coordinator, as the AD of outreach. I see all of this potential for prevention work, and we're working within the limits. That said, and maybe this is a segue to the things that are encouraging or what I enjoy, it is sort of like a little bit of a challenge. It's kind of like, all right, I've been given this algorithm. Now I have to work with that to make this something great and effective. So yeah, what I really like to do is maybe think about it kind of like in maybe more like a formula. Like I have these sorts of resources available to me. And so here's the need. So what are we going to be able to do to kind of make that happen? And I like that I'm forced in many ways to be challenged in creative ways to make that work. I think the therapy that I do as well, one-on-one and in group therapy settings, I think that feels really similar. It's just at a different level. You know, when I'm wondering what resources do I have at the ready that we can offer this program for students, but then also at a one-on-one or group therapy level, what resources do the people in this room have right now so that we can have a really effective outcome and help this person get their needs met. So I really enjoy the challenge because it's fulfilling when you see the next step and the outcomes from that.
Thank you so much. Samantha?
The thing this is a past discouragement, and I'm sharing it because I think a lot of people in our field have gone into this field because they want to help people, and then this is something I struggled with for many years, was feeling like I was never going to pay back my student loans, that, working at a nonprofit, I was also working 2 or 3 other jobs at the time just to support myself, because I didn't know that you could make enough money to survive without having multiple jobs. And so, that's one thing that private practice has really helped me with. It's not the only way to do it, but that's what worked for me, because I struggled financially after school. And there's a lot of talk within the therapist community of like, you have to pay your dues and do your time. And that's not really true. You can connect with a supervisor who can help you guide you through this to not end up in the position that I was in for many years. And I'm glad that I see that now. And it's something I wish I had known then. So that's one thing. And when I work with primarily individuals right now, and it can be discouraging when, you're sitting there with someone and they're not making choices to change or heal or grow. And that can be really difficult because we can't tell them what to do. So that can be challenging. And it can be, depending on the population that you work with, it can be difficult to take in a lot of people's stuff, and then you sit with it, and you have to have your own tools to do that. And some days are just harder than others. But at the same time, that's the piece that I love the most, is being able to watch someone grow, to see someone have a really hard day one week and then have some of those aha moments, and to see that growth and have them be able to reflect on the growth that they've had. That's really why, I think most of us choose to do this work, is to help people. And it's motivating and powerful. I learn from my clients every single day. You know, I'm not just helping them, they're helping me in so many ways too. And then also the great part of the job, and I think it was Stephanie who said this, is maintaining your license and getting to do CEUs. I love to learn. I love school. If you could pay me to go to school, I would. And that's like my avenue of being able to continue to do that. And you get to pick and choose, for the most part, what you continue to learn and how you get those CEUs. Of course, there's always exceptions and like mandatory things, but that's another thing that I love.
Thank you so much. Lauren, I'm going to take the next question. I think it's a great segue from what we were just talking about here. What support networks besides family and friends or family and friends are there for you in the therapy profession?
I can start. So besides family and friends, which are always a great support, is connecting with other professionals who also are possibly doing the same or similar work, so that you have things to bounce ideas off of. I have a network of former colleagues, and actually, like Stephanie, I'd love to chat with you. It seems like we have like similar backgrounds. Like building your network in that way is super helpful. I'm in a million therapist groups on Facebook and other connections there. And then also your own therapist, consulting with another therapist when you need to. It is well worth spending the money on that. I can't say that enough, because this job can be very lonely at times, because it is you and an individual often sitting in front of you. But you don't have to navigate it alone. You shouldn't navigate it alone. And having those other professionals, whether it's your own therapist, consultation, just your own network of clinicians that you can call when you have a hard client and things like that, and making sure you're taking care of yourself in other ways is like the best foundation that you can have. So I probably missed some things, but that's how I look at it.
Thank you. Cassie, or
I
Cassie,
can,
would you
I
like to
can
go
hop in.
next?
Yeah, I can hop in next.
Okay.
Yeah, that's just one of the things that I love about the counseling center setting, is that there's always a team. So I did a number, not even that long ago, a number of years ago, I did both full-time work at the counseling center and private practice on the side. And because I'd always had interest in some private practice. I was a member of a group practice, so I didn't need to do the bookkeeping and things. That was kind of my my requirement if I was going to go into doing anything in the community. And it was great because I was able to do a lot of the work long-term, like a lot of different types of work that I don't normally see in as presenting concerns in college students at the counseling center. But so I no longer am doing that. I had children, and when they need to be picked up from daycare in the middle of the day or school in the middle of the day, it just became too much to balance both jobs. But the people I worked with in the private practice are still a major source of support in such a really unique and different way than the people I have here at CAPS. Here at the counseling center, this team is just like my lifeline. I know that I can call in sick and somebody's going to take care of stuff. And that even if I'm really worried about maybe a student who I was supposed to see that day, somebody will work with that student if I'm like, yeah, I don't feel ready to reschedule them. Let's make sure they get seen. So that's amazing to me. And then people from both of my grad programs and undergrad, I mean, geez, I can't even get, the number of times that we consult with each other throughout the year about all of our different specialty areas, and just stay in touch with those people you've grown with in that really harrowing sometimes journey of grad school is really, really immeasurable. It's really, really awesome to keep those contacts too.
Yeah, I would agree to every single one of those. And being a new clinician, being associate level, we have to get supervision. I'm not sure if that's the same for other licenses. I'm sure it is. Yeah. And honestly, I swear half the time our supervisions are just like our own therapy sessions, and they help us so much, guide us through it. And it's, yeah. And also the people in my grad program, granted, I graduated in May, but we're all still close, and we're just kind of tackling it together.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Cassie. That's a great ending to this. And I just want to say, Lauren and I are both Penn State grads. So now you have 5 more people here in your network. And as I think Stephanie and Samantha may have mentioned, even networking amongst alumni. We are here for each other. We're all in this together. And we hope that you were able to gain some knowledge today, hearing about these amazing alums' journey. And we want to thank you so much, Stephanie, Cassie, and Samantha, for being here with us today. It was an amazing panel. We are recording it. We are going to post this on our YouTube channel for the Career Enrichment Network, so that if you do have a friend that wasn't able to attend due to class, or you want to watch it again, all of our programs that have happened in the past couple of years are on our YouTube channel, and we will send the link to you as well on that. So thank you.
I just want to echo that thanks. You all are amazing. And as a counselor myself, like I was just like over here saying yes during the entire panel. So thank you all so much for spending the time here today to help our students. And we'll see you soon.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.